This is Spiritual Soul Sliding Sideways, Chapter 21, The Order of Knowledge. I reach for stability, knowledge I gain. Control can be mine before I go insane. I stare out into a world I cannot control. I am disturbed by the things that happen, and there is very little I can do about them. This random life is the insanity of what is to come next. I exist in a state of understanding. I understand how much I need to hope. I pray each day that life can be in my favor. I know everyone on the planet is likely praying for favor. It makes me wonder why things happen when they do. I am thankful for very little that happens in my life. It seems the more things you're involved in life, the odds of things going wrong increase. The odds go up due to the statistics linked to all possibilities. Possibility is great, except for when the possibility is the very thing I do not need and would never need. I love possibilities when it comes to getting more money. I do not like possibilities when it comes to things that go wrong. When things go wrong, it takes up time, like the whole sewer in the house backing up. I have reached for some kind of control over my life. I have found that no matter how much control I have, there is always something I cannot control. I can lose control over my life at any time. The many reasons for controlling life and its associated aspects can vary. I found a need to control my external and internal realities because of chaos and fear. Control we have without fear is what is subconscious. Control helps us feel like we have a good grip on reality. Too much control can be harmful. The worst kind is when we feel the need to control everything all the time. I tried to control every second of my life, and what that gave me was stress and acid reflux. I felt that I could manipulate every point of life in some way. I needed to try to find the kind of control that would give me the best guarantee of order. I felt self-manipulation and worldly manipulation were necessary but exhausting. I began to learn that controlling life for peace and happiness was insane. The world is chaos and an unpredictable train wreck. Trying to control this life is like trying to control a tornado while you are standing in the eye of it. Knowledge, wisdom, and understanding weren't enough to cope with the constant changes. I was working to master control and manipulation over something inconsistent. The less consistency life had, the more frustrated I became. I was naive and figured that there were only so many life combinations to learn. I thought there had to be a certain number of universal similarities in life. I came to find there are many things that are the same, but the consistency varies, even if only a little. The variations in life became a challenge. I wondered if there was a cure for life's many varying changes. I did not want my life to be wrong anymore. I did not want the wrong in life to be a part of my life anymore. I had come to love chaos at a certain time in my life. My love for chaos became a love for being out of control. I had to ask myself, how can I get to a place of love and leave chaos and unhealthy freedom behind me? How could I get to a place where I was able to manage my emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual well-being? Even if we find control in some way, we will always find that what is out of our control will cause us to feel frustrated. When we want control, we can have so much control that chaos is no longer fun. The more we need inner control, the more it is because we may have lived a life out of control. We're usually trying to find a kind of control that will still make us happy. We can take control of our lives. We can manage everything that should happen and how it should happen. We will feel frustrated when others do not feel how we feel. I have managed my life in many ways. I have changed who I am dozens and dozens of times. I have treated my life like molding putty. I wanted to find a risk-free life. I had lived a high-risk life. I had less trust in myself because of the risks I took in life. The more we try to control life, the more we desire to shape our journey. No one wants control that much. Trust is a problem unless control makes them happy. We all want freedom. We want a life that feels worth it. Control can take away freedom because we become our own prisoners. What level of control is necessary for a life that only fully dictates? What would we have to do to control and manage life with a predictable outcome? Taking control of our lives is one way of trying to predict the outcome. We all would like to know how life will go and how life will end up. When we use control as a way of predicting our lives, we may not react well to life's constant changes. Sometimes we may not even feel good about life when it changes for good or bad. We can section out and plan every part of our lives, but the random parts of this life will always catch up to us. We can choose control as a tool for making it through this life. We can find it hard to control ourselves and reality. Sometimes the more control we seek, the more life works in opposition. I have learned that there will never be enough control to be free from chaos. I have wanted to learn to control enough to be able to let go and be free without having to think. I had thought once I had taught myself the right type of control, I could let go and be free to exist. If I were free, would I still be capable of maintaining control? I was wrong to believe that I could have control so ingrained in me I could be free to exist on autopilot. While I was looking for this auto control, I never felt comfortable letting go of control. I felt that I had not learned enough control to maintain composure. I had wondered if there was a natural control so I could give up conscious control. My desire to make my mind do it caused me to become more controlling over time. I wanted to succeed. I felt the only way to succeed was to maintain an aggressive form of control. How can we be free? How much can we trust any mental and emotional response to life? How do we react to how we think and feel? Is it possible to feel a full range of emotions and still respond with our best interests at heart? One of the reasons for control is because of how we may have acted in the past. To what extent do our actions stem from our emotions? If a person has ever lost control in life, it can bring out a need to be super controlling over self and life. When there were times I lost control, I considered it a normal reaction to what I thought and felt. I had thought at one time in my life that we all should say what we think and express what we feel. Learning about mental and emotional freedom was a tough journey. It often felt like a path to self-destruction. Emotional and mental freedom almost destroyed me because I felt I needed to be so free. The process for healthy control over all that we are is self-discipline. We should stop to consider how strong our feelings and thoughts are. A multitude of things happen in life that take away our control. We feel secure when we have healthy control over our lives and surroundings. The more insecure we are, the more we tend to protect ourselves from unseen foes. We may want to control how others treat us and how we treat others. We achieve a healthy control overall when we learn to accept what we can and cannot control. We should gauge how much we can influence things. We should become more realistic about how much life affects us and how much effect we can have on life. We may believe we can have control over cause and effect as much as we want. Believing in absolute control can lead us to narcissism, God syndrome, or egomania. The difference between healthy and unhealthy control lies in how we respond. A good way to handle things is to pause and think about our actions and the results. The unhealthy control we can have in life is when we live with no thought of consequences. Either way, we still process how we feel and what we think. Healthy or unhealthy control, we need to consider the consequences of our actions. We can take control over life so much that we may feel we can pick the consequences of our actions. When we feel we can pick the consequences of our actions is when we feel others need to listen to us. We may think what we are saying is the right way things should always be. Control is such a tricky thing. Can we always be right? How we take control can lead to so many different problems in our lives. A certain problem that too much control can lead to is OCD and paranoia. The more you need to control, the more problems you will face. We can feel the need to have control when we feel violated in some way. We can want more control when we want to show others how important we are. We can desire control when we need to feel confident. We can manage things in life. We can seek control to prove to ourselves that we can solve life's problems. We may always want others to believe we know what we are talking about. Can we surrender unhealthy control and redefine what healthy control is? Life is full of different situations. We can't always be in control. We will lose control in the end, regardless of how much control we maintain. We will act out in life, no matter how long we have maintained some form of calm persona. No matter how in control we are, there will always be a crack that will form, leaving us out of control. Life is so random and unpredictable. There will always be something we do not understand. Suppressing thoughts and feelings means choosing to be ignorant. We can choose to avoid certain parts of life to maintain control. Control stops us from learning how we can manage new things. We can have so much control over our lives that we stop learning how to manage anything outside of our control. We can try to control things outside of our control. We can fail to face problems and practice ignorant control. Avoiding problems due to ignorance means we are managing them through self-delusion. People imagine control through self-delusion. Life is random chaos and will always be random chaos. We can organize chaos regularly, but life will still be random chaos. When we are trying to control random chaos, that is when we are trying to tame something like the sun. We may have 1% control over life and what happens in life. I say 1% because I factor in all of life's possibilities. 1% is what happens within our life circle. The life circle is what can happen to us inside. The outside circle is our environment of cause and effect. We should factor in all of life's circles. We should consider what can always happen. We may need to control what we interact with every day. We may try to gain control over life. Super control is us trying to force control over everything in existence. Can we control existence? Control over life is more than what we do and do not do. We have no true understanding of what it would take to have universal control. Universal control over everything would take the mind and understanding of God. We have not scratched the surface of what all existence is. What universal control do we need in life? We do not know how to determine the extent of control we can have. We can try to control everything. Lacking knowledge, the knowledge we lack will also be the reason we lose control. We can believe we understand how a chainsaw works. We can know how to turn the chainsaw on. We can believe you need to put the chainsaw to the wood. We can believe the chainsaw will go right through the wood. Do we know the dangers of kickback? Also, how much control and strength do we need when the chainsaw cuts through the wood? How well do we know ourselves? Do we have a true understanding of ourselves? Can we grasp the short-term and long-term effects on our lives? We can find a way to have control over the things we want in life. Sooner or later, we will find out the short and long-term effects of how healthy our choices were. I try to factor in how much I do not know about life. I no longer consider how much I know because what I know never seems enough. I do not know how much knowledge we would need to control even the smallest thing on a universal level. To control even the tiniest thing in the universe, you need a lot of knowledge. We should consider how much knowledge it takes to move a finger. What knowledge does it take to move our hands? Consider the amount of knowledge that needs to exist in us to be capable of any body movement. The control over moving one finger happens in a fraction of a second. If we can't move our fingers, something has disrupted how information flows. This shows that a person can lose both knowledge and the ability to use it. When that happens, we also lose the control we think we have. We only control what we can understand. This holds true if there are no limits on information transfer. We can start a fire in the forest. We can control the fire the best we can. The fire can spread to a tree that spreads to more trees. We will lose control once the limit of our ability to manage the fire becomes too great for us to maintain control. I have found the best way to attempt to be in control is knowledge. Control over life is when we realize there will be times we do not understand. The kind of control not knowing gives us is a control over knowing we may not know. Not knowing is the random perception of change. My confidence comes in knowing. I need to learn to adapt to what I cannot control. I need to be capable of gathering as much information as possible to try to maintain control. Knowledge can give me confidence in knowing how much control I can have and how much control I may lose. When we feel our lives are out of control, it is because we are missing the information on how we can gain control. When we lack the info to take charge of our lives, it's often because we create our own idea of control. We can conceive ourselves that we could karate chop a redwood down with our hands. The reality is we cannot knock a redwood down if we threw our whole body against it. We can be sure of things, but when tested, can prove to not be true. I look for things in life that I can prove, to put my knowledge to the test. I want to prove something before I experience it. Can we prove something without experiencing it? I realize that anything can happen to me that I never considered. I know I need to understand. I could drown in the ocean even if I live in the desert. Strange circumstances can happen. I could find myself in the middle of the ocean regardless of what I believe. Life has a way of making us turn left when we are convinced we would turn right. Life is its own maze that we often do not have control over. The things we can usually control come from when we suppress everything to fit our bubble of control. Suppressing our feelings helps us feel less affected. It lets us decide how much we want to think and feel. We can lose our sense of control when someone shatters our illusions. What breaks us becomes the end of the control we feel we have. We become affected when we feel chaos. When we feel chaos, we can begin to lose control once it gets in. We should never live under the delusion that control is constant. While we maintain control, we should be thankful that chaos has not broken us. We will always have a need to be in control. Sometimes what can take away our control is something we have not yet considered. The amount of evil associated with control is domination over life. We can violate free will. When we violate free will is when we have stepped beyond the amount of control we should have. We live in a gray world, and everybody usually determines whether they want black or white. Life is not as simple as black and white when we live in a gray world. We can live in a blue house and call it a red or yellow house. Whatever we want to call the house, the truth is that it is blue. It does not change. We all need to admit we live in a gray world that is full of random chaos. Can we accept we are living in a world that is gray and full of random chaos? The truth is gray, not black and white. Sometimes the amount of control we want will cause us to make information up. Our current knowledge may make sense to us. We can try to maintain control with what makes sense to us. We need to consider how true our logic and knowledge are. Did we make something up without proving it? Did we maintain control with false logic? Did we manage our lives for so long while making it up as we go? True knowledge can offer us more control over life, even if it is not complete control over life. It is better to have knowledge we can prove for some control over life. We do not want to control life with what we only believe is true. We can make sense out of nonsense. Most of what we know works because we apply it to shallow nature, and it serves a shallow purpose. We can order a meal. The meal can be less than satisfying. When the meal does not satisfy us, we can feel upset. Is how we feel shallow? How we feel matters. Our feelings can seem shallow compared to watching someone choke to death. We may not help someone choking to death because we lack the knowledge to do so. A lack of knowledge is how shallow our information is sometimes. Was our meal a matter of life and death? We can make choices that can be life or death. True knowledge helps us know if it is a life or death situation. Control and knowledge are crucial for a good life. Without them, we risk ignorance and suffering. Knowledge is power and control. We can maintain the best control over our lives when we keep learning. When we keep learning, we only increase our odds of being able to maintain control. There will always be those situations we will not be able to control, no matter how much we learn. There is so much we need to learn if we want to control the smallest possible chaos. We can only do our best in preparing ourselves for things to happen. There are so many things that can make our lives feel out of control. Sometimes we may get things in the right order and maintain control. Sometimes we might have things so far out of order that there is no chance for control. Control serves the purpose of life and death. Control serves the purpose of this life and the spirit world. Everyone has said everything for the sake of having control. Control is the knowledge of how we do things, how we understand others, and how others understand us. Language was created to help us control what we need to understand. Our whole purpose for any order is to discover new methods for gaining control over our lives. The many choices we make in life and the end results are how we learn to predict some outcomes. I have found that control is something that will always be a slippery slope. I have found that knowledge can be as good as getting a screen to hold water. I found that some knowledge is as sharp as a knife when I need to cut something. We should always consider what knowledge we need when we want control. We should always consider the source of our knowledge when maintaining control. We need to be able to understand how much control knowledge can give us. We should always consider how much we may need to adapt and accept we may not gain control. Sometimes we should consider that control is only as good as our knowledge. The time it takes to have control can be unpredictable. Control is an illusion. It can be taken away from us at any moment.